Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast. We are in for an episode, a solo episode, talking about virilization, PD use for my own personal anecdote, and of course, what I've learned over the years as a competitor and a coach, and also being around people that are in the assisted realm. Now, what I will say with this side of the sport, I'm going to talk a lot about, my personal circumstances and my own risk reward ratio, what that actually means, what that actually looks like. And what I would say is, guys, that when you're listening to podcasts, when you're listening to anything talking about PED use, that this needs to be an individual decision. Nothing I say on this podcast or on any of the episodes that you listen to are in any way, shape, or form validating that anyone should be jumping on PEDs, that it's, necessarily a good thing, as it were. And we can delve into what I mean by that. And what I really, really want to get across always is that through that personal choice, me doing the podcast, me talking about my own PED use, that's to help, hopefully, others make an informed decision. What does that even mean, right? Because let's face it, when we are faced with opportunities in life, of ventures in life, sometimes a lot of us are just going to go balls deep and worry about the consequences later. And that can be, of course, related to PED use, right? Because generally speaking, in the assisted realms, people are using PEDs, including myself, because it's a performance enhancing drug. And of course, there's still taboo, right? There is still taboo in the realms of assistance. And that can add to taking away from you making an informed decision. And that's certainly a motivation for me, right? Because if we are contemplating this, if we're looking at this as an option, but yet we're so shit scared to ask questions or look for information, and we go down this route without an educated, informed decision, this is where we can then end up in scenarios where perhaps we didn't realize we would be. Now, also in this episode, what I also want to talk about is I'm going to break down my own use of PEDs, and essentially the title of the episode, Have I Virilized? And masculinization is within that. I'm also going to talk about the mental health side of PED use from observations from my own use, but also people around me. And then I'm going to talk about, and this is very apt for this time, the new fit model division that has been announced in the IFBB realms, because that's going to feed in really nicely. And I actually got asked by Molly, who is a listener, and I'm sure she will be listening, to talk about my opinion on it. Because I'm going to talk about it as an overview rather than, it's not going to turn into anything other than, what the thoughts are around that. But that feeds into PED use and, whether this is more of an entry level category for people to use. And could that affect PED use in the bodybuilding realm? Again, everything I say on podcasts, right? And I will remind you of this, guys, when you're listening to a podcast, when you're listening to someone talk, you're not always going to gel with everything they say. Or there's certain things that you might go, holy shit, I resonate with that 1,000,000%, And this is where I will always try and caveat things. I will always try and give multiple versions of what certain information can look like. And I will always try and do that with the guests. So, guys, let's get stuck in. Now, when I first started to look at, PED use and what the assisted realms looked like for me, it was very much a scary thought, right? Like it was, for me, it was like as soon as you take any level of assistance, you are no longer natural. So that takes away your opportunity to compete with natural federations. Of course it does, unless you're going to cheat, which I do not advise. So this decision that we're making, if we're going to go down the PED route, there's that to think about, but also utilizing things like myself, like femtests. That's something I see that I will take for the rest of my life. And did I want to start something like that with the commitment of potentially using it for the rest of my life? So there's those thought processes initially. Now, also, my big, not really worry, I wouldn't say. It was certainly intrigue, but there was levels of, can I bring myself to inject, right? And this is going to be a big topic in regards to PEDs for a lot of you guys, not just females, males as well. The thought of injecting can be quite daunting. And it's just, I feel like the difference between oral use and injectables, it feels like, and this is personal to me, it felt like it was like this so much higher level PED use. It's like, oh, I'm actually going to take steroids. And that was, labeled and attached to the injectable route. It was like, whoa, this is quite big. This is a big commitment for me. And this is where I believe, doing your research, having an understanding into why, for a start, why do you want to use PEDs? Then looking at the potential side effects. Now, this is where, and this is why I want to talk about this. This is where you can take something like paracetamol and there could be side effects. Well, you can pretty much take fucking anything, right? Over the counter, and there's a side effect. But we would still take these things. And sometimes, I mean, me included, I wouldn't even look at the side effects. So when it comes to PEDs, are we for a start aware there's side effects? And are we looking at them with reality? So if this happens to you, if this potential side effect happens to you from utilizing PEDs, are we okay with that? If it's something we haven't experienced before, maybe we're like, it might happen, it might not. That's okay. I'm happy with that. And this is where we all have to make a choice. Hopefully, guys, no one's making you do steroids. If they are, I would phone the police because that's not okay. This is where I say it needs to be a personal choice because steroid use is real. It is very much real. We are in 2024, right? And this is a lot of my ethos comes from this, right? If I don't talk about these things, if I don't get guests that talk about these things, yes, you can listen to other bodybuilding podcasts, you can watch reels, etc. But I certainly feel there's a duty of care from myself in this place of influence to actually talk about these things in an honest fashion and also help you guys feel included in the conversation. Not talk about it to a level where you're like, I've got no idea what the fucking hell she's on about. So anyway, when we talk about the side effects, you can be aware of them, but if they don't occur, you might think, cool, that's fine. I'm not too worried. I'm using PEDs. No side effects have occurred. In a certain breath, I've gotten away with it. And that's not me, being ignorant to it. But if we can take something that enhances our physique development journey and we don't get any side effects, for the majority of people, that's going to feel good, right? Obviously. If you're able to do things and you don't get any repercussions and it's something that excites you, it's something you want to do, and it's something that benefits you personally, if you don't get any downsides to that, of course, that's going to make you feel even better. But what I will say in regards to this, and I'm going to talk you through my own use and the side effects that I've noticed, is that over time these things can happen. So it's not necessarily, and I think this is sometimes where people can find themselves in a difficult scenario, it's not necessarily that if you're going to get a side effect, the first time you take something like, let's say, Anavar, and nothing happens, that's not to say that in 4 cycles time or over a longer use, or if you titrate up your dosage, that you won't get side effects later down the line. And that's an important part to say, because again, if we get away with it and we do a cycle of Anavar or whatever antibiotic we're talking about, and then we do another cycle. It could be literally the 8th cycle. That could span across years. Now, also, there's going to be people listening, I'm sure, that take anabolics for long-term use. And that might be a lesser dose. And again, something could happen over time. Now, this could also be a gradual response. So you might not clock certain things happening, but then they can happen a little bit quicker over time. So that's something to consider as well, because I can hand on heart say that I can almost guarantee there'll be at least someone listening to this and they go, shit, I didn't know that, because I didn't understand that. I didn't know that. And it's through my own exploration and actually me clocking my own side effects that I've understood it more and more. And this is something that I talk to all of my clients about. And it's something that I will, there is absolutely no chance I'm going to say, take this and not talk about what the side effects might be. And also really, really, and, again, this is my own personal coaching style, really talk about it till I'm blue in the face, because I need to understand, if I'm talking to someone about PEDs, that they understand the PEDs we're talking about. And like I said already, I don't enforce that my clients take PEDs, absolutely not. But if someone asks me about it, I'm going to talk about it, and that's important. Now, when we are talking about the side effects over time, this is the perfect segue into my own, what side effects I've noticed. Now, when embarking on the PED route, like I say, it was, when I decided that I would incorporate a multitude of different PEDs, it was based on what is labeled as, and you may have heard of this, the safer use model. So a number of compounds that some of them are year round, and then anabolic exposures on top. So this, again, is going to be different for everyone. So for my own use, I use FemTest, which I started that because my test was bottomed out. So that was actually from a health standpoint, as it were, if you want to label it that. I was going to say medical there, but more from a health standpoint. From, competing for so many years, so many preps, competing natty, my test was bottomed out. So I used that initially. That was like, okay, so got my bloods done. My test is 0.01. Holy shit, what do I do? So FemTest was going to be part of my baseline, and it still is. And then I also use injectable L-carnitine, and that's a daily PED that I use, and that also is combined with growth hormone. So I use growth hormone 2 units a day. Now, that's my year-round model. When I use anabolics, I use exposures. So I use a set period of time to utilize an exposure to. Previously, I've used Anavar, but now my preference is Primo. Potentially in the future, I might try Masteron, but I haven't yet. So I have my baseline year-round, I was going to say supplements then, special supplements, but PEDs. The only thing that I've titrated there is the growth hormone. And that was around when I had my knee surgery, because that helps, of course, the recovery. Well, I say, of course, you may not know that. It does help the recovery, and it was helping my knee. So I was injecting that into and around my knee around the time of knee surgery. So I increased up to 4 units a day. So that's the only time I've sort of come away from my usual baseline model. And the only things that I've used on top of that in conjunction with my knee surgery is being able to use essentially peptides to help my recovery post-surgery. So anyway, I use those year round. And I'm due to have bloods done again. So that's something I can share with anyone that's interested. I'm sure I'll do some stories, etc. about that. So when I talk about the anabolic exposures, so this is something that you're all, I'm saying you're all, more than likely, we're all going to have different opinions, different risk versus reward, different coaches, and different ideas around what we want to gain from using anabolics. Now, I personally like to do exposures. That has the potential to keep down the risk of side effects, having that exposure length over a controlled time. It also, for me, works within my timeline around training. I also set myself up for exposures. And I've talked about this on my stories before. Again, when we're using PEDs and using anabolics for a set reason, for an exposure length, I personally believe that it's smart to timeline this. And this is something I talk to clients about also, to actually maximize the benefits of that anabolic being in place. Now, I'm an organized person, I'm a structured person. I like to I guess I like the idea for me and my brain that I'm going to utilize Primo for X weeks. That's going to fit in with X training block. I'm going to start it here. I'm going to end it here. I'm going to have a deload off the back of it, a deload before it, potentially look at would I bump food in that time. And I actually like to have that timeline and structure in place. I don't want to do it willy-nilly personally. I like to have that. This is what I'm doing. I'm essentially getting the most from the exposure and getting out. That's how I like to do it. Now, exposure length for me personally, initially, I liked 6 weeks. I now like to have ideally around 6 to 8 weeks, because that allows me to be able to have that mesocycle in place, a deload either side, and being able to maximize my performance in that time. Because, of course, when we are using anabolics, and I'll talk about this, there is a change in potentially training performance. And for sure, for me, there's a change in what we do in the gym. There is also potentially amplified recovery. So the likelihood is we're really going to send it in this mesocycle. And how long can we do that for? How long can we, really crank it in an exposure if we are really utilizing these anabolics and we were really pushing ourselves in that time to maximize the benefit of using anabolics? Now, I say that, preferably it's been 6 to 8 weeks. My last exposure, I did extend. Now, I personally, I feel like I am able to make educated decisions. I also feel like I'm in a position where, for me, I wanted to extend an exposure, the length of using Primo, to see what happened. And also at the 6 week part, at the 8 week part, I was like, I'm really loving this. And I'm very good at being able to touch base with myself, utilize my biofeedback, be able to make educated decisions. And that has taken a lot of time, because what I also did was extend the training block. Now, for me, again, you're going to get so many different opinions, guys, and this is where it's important to speak with your coach and trust your coach. For me, I was only just getting back to being able to perform at a higher level for my lower body training. Now, if you know me, you know my story. I had knee surgery at the end of March, and that compromised my training a lot. So it's taken a lot of time to get back to being able to train properly, particularly on the lower portion. So actually, what happened over this extended exposure, because normally, as I say, I would look to do 6 to 8 weeks. My preferable is 8 weeks in the past. I was in such a good spot. Even 4 weeks in, I thought, shit, I'm responding extremely well in this exposure. And this was the first exposure I personally feel that I had so much in line for it to be incredibly productive. Training was, in such a good spot. Recovery was so good. My mind is in such a good space that it was like, I actually want to make this personal decision to extend this exposure. Now, that then comes with that risk versus reward ratio. I've never done Primo for 12 weeks. Was I willing to roll the dice, as it were? And I must admit, there was a bit of hesitation to a certain degree, because for me, it's like, okay, so the more we're exposing ourselves to anabolics, I personally feel, like I touched on already, the more risk there are for potential side effects. Am I actually okay with the potential of these side effects? Am I genuinely okay with that? And again, some of these side effects we don't see, they're not visible. And that can be quite scary, right, guys? Because we don't actually know what's going on. And I had to have a serious conversation with myself. And this is how seriously I personally take it, to decide, do I actually want to have children? And if at some point I was told you can't have children, am I okay with that? And for my own personal reasons, maybe it will happen one day, but I personally don't feel like that's something that I want to do. Like I say, there's many personal reasons for that. One being, for me personally, is very scary, the thought of bringing a child into this world. And this world is a scary place. I don't know if I would want to do that. That's just me personally. I just feel like, it's getting scarier and scarier. Even the thought of social media, what it is now, bringing a child into that, and, in 10, 15, 20 years time, what's the world going to be like? And I've always felt that, like everything I've been through in my own life, I'm like, fuck, I've had to find some crazy fucking strong armor here to get through life. This is just life, guys, let alone the stuff that we can feel we go through in bodybuilding, the extensions you have as your own personal journey. It's a fucking heavy weight, guys. Life in itself, it's crazy. And I have this thought probably, on the daily, maybe multiple times. Whoa, what strength, people listening now, people in the world, all around the world, that we have to just tolerate life. It's wild sometimes, guys. Anyway, I know that's a side tangent, but fertility being affected is a thing. So I certainly, this exposure that I just did not long ago, as I say, I had a serious conversation with myself, and I'm not in the position to have a child anyway. And my desire to have a child is not there. So that is part of my decision making process. Now, as I said, I'm going to talk about noticing side effects and the changes over my use of anabolics. So one of the things that is going to be very, very common, is this is a side effect of using steroids for females, is the change of your voice. Now, I've always had a deep voice, and I actually got mildly bullied about it when I was like maybe 17. A group of lads, I was dating one at the time, and I answered the phone, and his mate was like, "Who's this boy on the phone?" And I was like, holy shit. That's a bit of a throwback. And I actually thought about this the other day. I think that's why I'm so territorial about people attacking females who have had their voice changed from steroid use, because I'm like, fuck off, bro. This is a personal decision. And if someone goes down this route, whether they know or they don't know, and their voice changes, who the fuck is anyone to come at them and bully, name call, all of the things that are associated with people that feel they need to put their opinion on women that use steroids and if they have their voice change. And that's where I feel that probably comes from for me. But you can use an app, and I'll put that in the episode description, to actually monitor if your voice changes. And that's a very useful tool. So for me personally, I've utilized, checking my own voice, and I haven't noticed a difference. I did, however, and I think this was probably psychological, guys. My thoughts on how powerful the mind is. That actually, when I was getting to like week 11, I was like, I feel like my voice is getting deeper. Am I getting paranoid? I remember one morning I was walking along doing a voice note, and I restarted the voice note because I was talking, and I was like, my voice sounds really deep. Is this just me, or is this the primo? Is this because I've extended the exposure? Is my voice changing? And it was quite a scary thought, right? And I was like, do I continue this exposure? Is something changing? And actually, I checked my voice, and it was very much the same. So I was like, okay, I'm all good. But that also, guys, that's something that I want to talk about, because until something happens, are we actually okay with that? That's the difficulty I find with, something like steroid use. I could easily be like, I don't give a shit if my voice changes, but if it actually did, how would I feel, and how do I know how I would feel, right? Like, how do you actually know how you would feel if you feel like I'm okay with it, if it does actually happen? Now, there's going to be people listening that like, I don't want to risk that. That's not part of my risk reward ratio, and I don't feel comfortable with my voice changing. So you would put things in place for that to be your risk versus reward. Hopefully, guys, you have a coach that actually offers some level of education. Now, this is a two-way street. I urge every single person listening that even considers PD use to actually do your own research. This is not just on your coach. And as I've already explained, a coach shouldn't be saying you have to take this. In my mind, I'm sure there's coaches that do, right? And if you take it, if you still do that, that is on you. Because, as I said, if someone's making you do it, phone the police. If someone's telling you to do something, that's still the act of you doing it, unless they are injecting you or putting pills in your mouth. You're still doing it, right? And that's important to remember. But please, guys, if you are considering going down this route, or maybe you're already taking PEDs, research the PEDs you are using. You can still get access to the baseline side effects, the baseline knowledge behind what this PED is using, because you might be listening, popping pills, and you don't really understand why you're doing that. But what I would urge you to think about is, you're putting something in your body that is a performance enhancing drug, but what is your commitment to the sport? Do you understand what you're taking, and do you understand the side effects? Because the side effects, they do span across multiple things, and I've only touched on, a couple here. Now, for me, that was a bit of a like, shit, I don't know if I'd actually be okay if my voice did change. That was quite a scary thought. I'm here to be honest. There's no point in me trying to, hide behind things and be like, oh, it's all good, I don't fucking care. Because it was quite daunting, the thought of having a change in my voice. It was like, what, this feels pretty wild. This could be a thing. And it, as I say, you can use the app to check your voice, and you can see if it is changing. You can then, of course, pull back or change, course if you want to. That's going to be down to you. Now, on top of the side effects I've already spoken about, for me personally, when I first used Primo, I did notice an outbreak on my skin. So I started to get what you would associate. I know a lot of you will be like, yep, the gym bros, like almost an acne breakout across the top of my shoulders, and almost a bit up my neck. And this was like, shit, this was like actual acne, right? Like, I was like, whoa, what's happened here? Obviously, I know why. Now, I got advised, my coach at the time, to try Accutane. Since then, I've stopped that. So I actually ran 2 weeks using it every day. That essentially made the acne get worse, which is often a thing that happens with Accutane. And then it got better. I titrated down on the dose, and then I was having one a week. However, since then, I've done some work with Sonia, who is on the pod in January. And from a functional health perspective, working on my GI, actually, the Accutane was taken out because it can have a very bad effect on your GI. But since then, I haven't used Accutane to control the breakouts, as it were. And slowly over time, from coming away from that I've done 2 exposures since. This last exposure, I have noticed, and it's still here very much now, the bobbles on my skin, across my shoulders. I do notice that NAC helps it. I know we've mentioned this on a pod with Michaela before. I noticed that it does help, and I actually ran out about a week and a half ago, and it has certainly got worse. So I would recommend that as something that can help. What I'll say as an extension to this is if it's something like acne or male pattern balding, sometimes, guys, we're going to be genetically predisposed to certain side effects. So if this is a good example, if I had acne as a child at school and that was very bad, if I then use PEDs in later life, that could exacerbate more so in me than someone else that isn't predisposed to acne, hasn't had acne before. However, I never had acne before. That was never a thing. And when I first tried Primo, it was like, shit, this breakout was like, however, me and my weird bodybuilding mind, again, remember, guys, these are my personal anecdotes and the way my brain works. I was like, I'm quite excited by this because the choice to use PEDs for me is very exciting. The risk versus reward, the reward for me is seeing my physique in the best place it's ever been in an off season. And also, my last prep, other things were used in the prep, PDs wise, and I've never got that lean before. So the excitement was certainly there. So when I did get the breakout of acne, I was like, I did it because I was so excited. I wasn't like, this is a negative. I didn't really care. And also, I use PEDs. I've got spots on my back. It's a common association. Do I care what anyone else thinks? No. So I wasn't affected by that. But if you listen and, acne is something you've struggled with in the past, it's something to consider that it could exacerbate when you use anabolics. And that's not me saying it will, but it could do. Again, something you might not know. This is also, we can notice changes in hair. I personally, hair growth wise, this last exposure, I'd certainly have noticed more hair growth and not thicker hair, but more hair. So the area or the areas, again, I'm here to talk about this, right? I've absolutely got nothing to hide. Is ironically my stomach. So from essentially the bikini line, the line where your knickers would sit upwards. I used to get like a few hairs on my belly button, like most of us probably do, and a bit going towards the bikini line. But now I get like, again, not thick, it's quite thin, but I've got dark hair. So it comes, from the bikini line up to my belly button, and I actually have to wax that now almost across the whole of that sort of front of the midsection. And then what I noticed literally this week, and I've never had this before, my top leg, my thighs, I never have waxed them or shaved them because they've never been hairy enough. But what I did notice is, because I do my own waxing, guys, little secret for you there, is that the front portion, so when I look at I'm on the camera now, guys. If you're listening audio, then you can't see. But essentially, where the knicker line goes across from the inner thigh to the hip, and out towards, if we go from there out towards the abductor, out towards the outer thigh, I noticed hair growing here. I've tried to explain that in the best way. I hope that makes sense, guys. But like a thin hair, like you would notice, like facial hair, if you're someone that has a bit of facial hair, and when you do your foundation, you notice the powder sits there, a bit like a hair like that, sort of a fluffy hair, almost a baby hair. And I hadn't clocked that because I do my waxing every sort of 6 to 8 weeks, and I was like, oh, I didn't notice I had the hair there before. And that's since doing my last Primo exposure. So we join the dots. Could that make sense? Absolutely. So this is something. Now, I do sometimes get some hairs on my chin also, but that's like, 3 or 4 hairs, pluck them out. I'm okay with that. So that's something that, we want to consider as well. You can also get male pattern balding, which is something I don't have. I actually have very thick hair. And with the growth hormone in as well, I noticed that actually that thickens my hair. My hair growth is very fast. My nails also very, very fast at growing. I often get the hairdresser and the nail person say, fucking hell, your cuticles, your nails, your hair grows so quickly. And I would say I credit that to my trusty growth hormone. Now, and the topic of growth hormone, this is not something that's happened to me, but I did touch on this with a pod with the girls, on a pod with the girls, about growth hormone potentially. The name is there, right? Growth hormone is that if you were to have a tumor, whether that's benign or cancerous or whatever that tumor is, it can promote the growth of Z tumor. So that's something that we maybe wouldn't be aware of. I do know people that can't use growth because they have benign tumors or, tumors that they don't want to risk growing. But if you don't know you've got a tumor, of course, that is something that would be unexpected. But that's just a bit of a side tangent there. Now, guys, probably the one you've all been waiting for. The what would I call this? I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to try and call this, but this is, the one that's probably the most intimate, the most personal, and the one that people probably don't talk about. Now, I don't really associate with a fuck ton of people in the industry. It's just not my vibe. That's a personal decision. I like to be authentic to myself. I like to talk in my own way, and you guys listen because hopefully you like the way my brain works. Now, I am always prepared to talk about anything. Again, anything I speak about today, DM me, I'll talk about it more. For me, this is about helping you understand, again, not promoting PD use, but actually talking about it and being a fucking genuine human, right? And clit enlargement is something that, like I say, not many people talk about it, but it is something associated with PED use. Now, for me personally, when I realized my clit was growing and it was larger than it was before I was using PEDs, it was a bit of a shock. And I'm going to be honest, it was, I think, because, it almost makes it that you're definitely using PEDs. This is something, you can't, this is not something you can get rid of now. Your clit is enlarged. This is changed. It also, and again, this is important to talk about these things, it also changes, and it has changed for me, and can change for you, the sensitivity. So it's very, very sensitive. Now, this can potentially affect your sex life, right? Because if your partner does or doesn't know about PD use, and do they know that this is a thing, it could cause questions. It could cause you to feel uncomfortable. And that, again, is something we need to consider, guys, because I feel comfortable. Although at first I was like, shit, I didn't actually think this would happen. That's just being honest. Again, I'm being honest because I'm hopefully, helping you guys here by being so honest. The thought of clit enlargement and actual clit enlargement is a very different thing. And this is why I talk about, if your voice changes, if things happen, if you cannot have children, until it actually happens, do we truly know that we're okay with it? And that's a question only you can ask, right? That's not on me. That's for you to decide. But it is a bit of a strange sensation, for you to feel more sensitive down there, for your clit to be enlarged. And again, this is why people won't talk about it, right? It adds to the taboo of like, oh my God, I can't talk about this. And, am I going to get stigmatized, and are people going to talk about me? Well, guys, I'm here sitting on a podcast talking to thousands of you about clit enlargement, and I'm doing it for a reason, because this is the type of thing that we need to understand. If you are using PEDs, guys, it's not just a case of, okay, I'll just use these PEDs. I don't, maybe the side effects won't happen to me. Maybe I don't care. Maybe that is you, right? Maybe that is you. But I want you to actually think about this, and this is why I'm talking about it. Again, something like clit enlargement and sensitivity, you might think, I don't really care about that. But it is quite a bizarre feeling. It's quite strange to look down and see, and people call it, micro penis or whatever. It is a bit weird, but I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it because it's my decision, it's my choice, and I've decided to utilize PEDs, and that is a side effect that has happened. And this is the thing, right? The title of the episode, Have I Virilized? People would, and I'm sure, and you might even think it, would think that is just your voice changing. But there's plenty of things that I've spoken about today that is far past that, guys. There's a lot of other things that can happen. Now, what I also want to talk about is the absolute statements that people can make online, and for you to take this for what it is. Now, I got asked once on a podcast, do I truly believe in the safer use model? Now, me in my own mind said yes, because my education was around the safer use model. It's what I was using, and I believe in it wholeheartedly for my own use. But the guest then caveated this, and it did put me on the spot, guys. But I'm here for it. I fucking love that. And he said, but if you're trying to pursue heavily muscled divisions, even bikini right now, when we're looking at the Olympia, there's a lot of muscle present, guys. I don't know what they're using, and I'm not speculating there. But he then said, the safer use model isn't appropriate for certain female athletes because they are chasing the ranks, and that could be in the divisions above me or maybe in the bikini realm. And that made me think a lot, because I see this all the fucking time. People saying, this is how much you should take. This is, an absolute. And this is why I always say, guys, I don't believe in absolutes. Yes, I believe in the safer use model. However, this is why I need guests that I have, and this is why I need people around me to make me, to thought provoke me, to help me think in different ways. Because if I was in the heavily muscled division, again, this is not me speculating that people in the divisions above me are using more than me, because some of them more than likely are using less than me. However, if in a fictitious example, I'm at a point where it's like, okay, my coach is saying, if you utilize X compounds, X doses, X length of time, and that might get you to top 5 in the Olympia, but your risk of virilization is much higher, are you okay with that? I might go, fuck yeah. This is my whole life. The risk of virilization for me, I am okay with it. I'm going to take XPDs that my coach has recommended or I want to do to get me there. Now, this is why I don't deal with absolutes. You won't see on my story, you should never take X. You should never do X. This is wrong. What I will say is, over this dose is increasing your risk of virilization. Are you aware that over a longer period of time this can happen? Like, I would talk about it from an educational standpoint, because this is where we can add, it's not really needed, right? Because me posting on my story saying no athlete should ever take X, someone could watch my story for a start and take X, and that could be extremely detrimental to that person. I might lose the trust of that person, and I might just look like a fucking dickhead. But also, if somebody wants to take higher doses, that is their decision. That is their choice. I've spoken on podcasts, I've had guests speak on podcasts before, on my podcast, where they've said, over X amount of Anavar or whatever it is a lot, and that's going to increase your side effects. But equally, there is that position of coming from this being a personal decision. Now, when we then look at what we're gonna think about for you as a person, what is your risk versus reward? What do you want to gain from this? And are you okay with the potential of side effects? Are you monitoring side effects? Are you communicating with your coach the likelihood of the side effects? Have you noticed changes? And over time, does your risk versus reward change? But this comes with an honest coach, an honest client, and a relationship where you can talk about it, because having structured PED use will help to make these decisions more informed and more accurate. So if you are someone that has tried, as my example, 6 weeks on Primo, everything felt okay. you felt like you got a good benefit, you feel happy with the result. Next time, would you do 8 weeks, which is what I did? And then the following time, bit of an experimentation on myself, very, very happy, able to extend a training block because my training is very different to you guys. I do have to do rehab training as well. It's not just balls to the walls every session. So I could extend that meso, complement that with my PED cycle, have a longer exposure, and feel very positive about that. But you can see here, even where I've outlined that for my own use, this isn't just like chuck it in and see how I go. This is very, very structured. And this is what I personally like to do with my own PD use. I don't want to just spank PDs. Yes. And this is what I want to talk about also. Yes, at the end of that 12-week cycle, guys, I wanted to do it for longer. Let's be honest. That cycle was the best fucking benefits I'd got and the best progressions I'd personally got from a cycle of anabolics, and it's addictive. And this is why I can talk about it, because it is fucking addictive. I felt so good. And then this leads me into my sort of second topic, as it were, as a topic starter, the mental health side of using PDs. Now, I spoke about this on my story. Let me tell you, when I took the Primo out, about 3 days after, about 3 days after, I felt like someone had taken my superpower. And that's not me over exaggerating. I also felt incredibly down. I felt in like a cloud. And this is what I spoke about in my stories. That actually helped because I'm a speaker, right? As you know, I talk. That helps me, process, etc. But I felt like a bag of shit. I also felt the after effects of caning it in that training block because, as I say, my training is structured around rehab as well, but upper body, very much so. I was PBing on multiple exercises every week in that exposure. Now, let's think about this logically. If you are progressing week on week, your lifts are flying in an exposure. The tendons, the ligaments, the joints, all of these things that are under strain over that time, the recovery benefits alongside using anabolics, using something like growth hormone, sleeping, etc. Obviously, in a growth phase, I've got food going in, can mask how it can feel for you for your physical being, so joints, ligaments, etc. Because this is why I call it superpower. You feel like you've got a fucking superpower. Like I felt untouchable in that exposure. Now, this might seem like I'm over egging it, but if you're listening and you haven't had this experience, I would say don't judge because I'm saying it literal. I'm an honest person. I'm not gonna, just fucking go on about a load of shit because there's no point. This honestly felt like a fucking superpower. I was, even sort of for me, it's sort of 7 to 10 days into an exposure. I'm like, oh yeah, I feel a little tickle here. PB start coming, my physique changed. I'm looking fuller. My delts. I'm trying to grow my delts. My delts are fucking filling out. My back, all of the areas I've struggled to fill out in the past. What does this cause? This also causes a dopamine hit, and I'm fucking vibing. So then I'm getting closer to the 8 weeks. My decision is, right, I'm going to do 12 weeks. Gets close to the end of the 12 weeks, I'm thinking, shit, I don't want this to end. So why do people run it all year round? Why do people extend exposures? Why do people increase their risk versus reward? Because it feels good, guys. Performance enhancing drugs. Let's not take away from it. Now, I am very much an addictive personality, and this is why I need to rein myself in because I want to actually be productive with my PED use. 12 weeks was already asking a lot. As I say, if my training was normal, if it wasn't rehab based also, then I wouldn't be able to do 12-week training block, right? But it's not. So it's different for me personally. I don't feel like I could spank, 12 weeks on the bounce, training 5 times a week as a normal bodybuilder, personally. Now, when I then took them out, as I say, I felt this black cloud. I felt like, holy shit, my superpower is gone. This is such a weird space. I had to, I had my deload, had to go back to the gym and accept that I felt this sort of lull. Really, really out of body experience. If you've been there, you'll understand it. But what I had in my mind that whole time, and this is a bit of advice for you if you're coming off cycle, is this is super important for me personally as a bodybuilder that is so focused on progression, is those numbers in my logbook, I wasn't letting them fucking slip. So yes, I've come off the anabolics, but I am very much focused on I'm still here to perform. I'm going to push through this weird feeling that I'm going through, this out of body experience, and I'm going to keep my numbers up. There's an element of accepting, okay, will, some of my numbers need to change. Is this going to be harder? This is why I like to have a deload after an exposure, to just be able to refresh, eat all the good foods, whatever, recover. Was it hard that first week back at training? Absolutely. I wanted my superpower back. It's as simple as that. Often, guys, we're chasing the dragon, right? Whether you're natty or assisted, bodybuilding brings that. We're chasing progression. There's always a goal. There's always a phase. There's always things we want to do. And that becomes addictive. Bodybuilding is addictive for me personally. Again, this is what I see, and this is my own personal anecdote, as it were. So, how does that feel, right? Because if you're not able to express how you feel in that time, and that's why I did the stories, and it made me feel better, because I could talk about how I felt. Because if I was just in my own head, come off cycle and felt like a bag of shit and didn't talk about it, personally for me, that makes me introvert, that makes me feel almost depressed. It's not a good spot for me to be. I like to talk about stuff. You can reach on your close ones. You can speak to maybe your coach, depending on your relationship there. But just a bit of a heads up there. Now, you might feel fine. Everyone is an individual, and that's important. But it's something that I noted very much so. I've never felt it so much, but I've never done a length of exposure for Primo over the 12 weeks. I've never trained that hard upper body wise in an exposure and for that long. When we look at it logically, probably is going to feel like you're a bit battered, right? But do we act with logic? Not all the time. So again, this is personal anecdote, right? What I will also note as well, and something that can change on and off cycle, is your mood and your sex drive. So from a mental health standpoint, me personally, on Anavar and on Primo, I am horny as fuck. I'm just going to say it how it is. There's absolutely no point in me being like, I don't want to say it how it is. Again, I've spoken about a lot on this podcast, and I'm just going to say it how it is. I was explaining this to my friend who is going to be listening to the podcast, good friend of mine, Kelly. I'm like, it's like an urge. It's like a sexual urge. And the way I also reflected was when I used to be at the gym that I worked at and I was natty, we used to get guys come in and use steroids, and they'd be like, and I described it as frothing at the mouth, like they were going to fucking start humping your leg. And I'd be like, this is mental. Like, are they just sex pests? Then I use anabolics myself, and I get it. I'm like, fucking hell. The sex drive is like through the roof. And that affects also, your mood. It's heightened, right? You're getting after it. For me, I'm like, yeah, fucking loving life. Now, what then comes off the back of it when you're post cycle, you can experience that lull, almost like, it feels a bit like sad syndrome, right? But you get in winter, it's like I just don't feel myself. It's a bit of a weird space. So having people around you that can communicate with, luckily I have you guys listening to my stories, and I can talk to myself, and that's how I like to do. I like to be able to talk to myself with these things and process it. So that is something that can be affected. We always associate with, men taking steroids, they're angry, they're this, they're that. But women can experience this as well. So it's important to know that also. Now, what I'm also going to talk about, I mentioned this at the start, is, as I was requested to ask about, the new fit model division in IFBB. Now, again, I'm not gonna go into it too much, but it's something. If one of you guys ask me to talk about something, I will. Now, I personally feel like this feeds into the episode very well because, and this is wild, right? This is a very good example of why PD use has increased over the years. Because if you look at the example that's been put on Instagram of Ashley when she was, starting out as bikini to now, holy fucking shit. This is wild, right? The standard of bikini and the amount of muscle bikini athletes have right now. Hence why I'm in a 2-year growth phase, guys. The level of muscle when we're looking at IFBB realms in particular, it is wild. And then that balance with condition. And, over the years, there's been more condition required. I've noticed across federations that is different. For me personally, PCA awards a more shredded look. And then IFBB, we're looking at the muscle. We're, of course, looking at the glute ham tie, the delts. And we're also looking at a very good level of condition, but not fucking, dialed in, striated to fuck. Now, the fit model division that's being introduced, from what I understand, is going to be more that original IFBB bikini look, so a softer look. Now, when we look at this, there's multiple benefits here for people that are looking at this. First of all, if you're looking to get into competing and perhaps you're going to use the UK amateur ranks and, the amateur federations, but you'd still like to try IFBB because IFBB is often framed as the most elite federation, as it were, and the most opportunities that you can get as an athlete. So would this open up the opportunity for people to try IFBB, but maybe they're not quite where the bikini division is now? Absolutely, because that's an opportunity to do that. Does it discourage the higher use of PEDs? Potentially, because as I've said throughout this, everyone's individual. You could have a woman's bodybuilder using the same amount of gear as me. I don't believe there's no sort of one size fits all. But could it potentially yield that there would be less PD use? Absolutely. Could it also offer people the opportunity to have that entry level to then have ambitions to climb up to doing bikini? Absolutely. And also natural athletes as well. And this is, something that can be utilized for people from a multitude of different scenarios to be able to compete with IFBB, to be able to potentially make this a healthier category. So if we're not looking for as much condition, that's not going to require as much in the prep. Is that healthier? Yes. Is that going to aid your longevity as bodybuilder? Potentially, depending on you as a person. Could this aid an overall more enjoyable prep? Potentially, yes. These are all things that are going to be very individual to you. And it's important to express that. Now, everything I've said there, it's giving opportunities. It's giving opportunities because I feel that IFBB have noticed that bikini is very different to what it was before. I remember when I first started out, and get this, and this was men's physique as well. The desired look was a female that could put on a bikini and be on the front of a magazine or on a beach having a photo shoot. That was pretty much the criteria I was aiming for. So you're not fucking peeled to the bone. You're not very muscular. You look toned. You look healthy. And it also said in the guidelines, a healthy glow. You look like the front of a magazine. You look like a bikini girl, a showgirl. And it's very different now. We've got more muscle being seen. We've got more condition being seen. The standard just continues to go up and up and up. And it's wild. Some bikini girls, in my opinion, in the IFBB realms, potentially in, maybe PCA as well, could be figure girls. More so, I would say, from my own observations from the IFBB Pro League, you could easily put some of those girls, on a figure stage, get them to learn the figure pose in, go and do an amateur show, and they could easily win, right? Depending on the athlete, this is just some observations I've had and that I'm exploring with you guys today. So very much so, this could be a positive for the industry, and we will see how it goes. Now, to wrap up today and to summarize and bring everything together nicely, I've got to stress this, guys. You are an individual person. Your physique, your structure, your mindset, your genetics, your sporting background, what you're willing to pour into the sport, your circumstance from your personal life, your risk reward. I can keep going here. It's not hard for me to make a list here, guys, of how individual you are. This even comes down to food selection, training selection, your ambitions in the sport, all of these things. And that needs to be important when you make decisions because, I mean, who am I to sit here saying you shouldn't use PEDs if you're not going to compete? Because some people use PEDs that don't compete. Some people might be in my scenario where they use fem tests because their test is low and that's more of a lifestyle thing. Again, another example of how individual this is. But what I want you to think about is, one, looking into this yourself. Two, ideally getting a coach that is going to educate you and help you understand this path. If they don't know and they are advising you, I would seriously look at that as a red flag, because should anyone be advising you if they don't know about PEDs? That's up to you guys. Also, what are you wanting to gain, and have you got that goal, that focus, that commitment to why you are utilizing PEDs? Whether, as I've just thrown in there, is it for a lifestyle thing? The majority of you guys are going to be competing or bodybuilding. Is this a goal that you really want to commit to? Do you want to make that shift and not be able to compete as a natural anymore? Is this really the right path for you? Maybe you don't know till you try, but I would think about it first, guys. Just do that due diligence to yourself. If anything, just before you start, even just take a few days, even if that's, enough for you. Maybe you want to jump straight in. Again, who am I to tell you what you can and can't do? I'm not. But like anything, once you do it, right? And there's certainly things, hopefully, in this episode that you guys can pick up, and that will help, because that's important to me. I want to help you guys. I want to talk to you guys honestly. There's certain things in this episode where it's a very personal nature. But to be honest, guys, the position I'm in with my own mind and my own physique development journey, I couldn't give a shit if people talk shit about me, if they want to, say anything about the things that I've talking about as a personal attack, because I might help one of you listening, and that's far more important to me than, facing conflict with someone that doesn't understand what I'm trying to do here. And that's an important message. So I hope that this episode, if anything, has been interesting to listen to. I hope you feel comfortable to be able to reach out if you want to talk more about anything. And also, if I've not covered something that you'd like to hear more about in this topic, let me know, guys, because all of these things stem from ideas in my own brain, but it's what I see you guys listening to and absorbing and you want to hear more about. So hope you enjoyed this episode, guys, and of course, thank you for your ongoing support. I hope you guys are seeing this year out in, I won't say in a good spot. What I'll say is in a spot where you can reflect on your year. Hopefully, you're entering the new year with new ambitions, new goals, new things that you want to achieve. And it's not a new year, new me vibe from me. However, I do believe that a new year can feel like a new chapter. It can give us a chance to embrace a new year, and that can feel good, right? And, in a nutshell, I hope that we can continue to grow together. We can continue to see our community growing with the webinars. The next one is on the 12th of Jan. If you want to join, let me know. We've got the seminar coming up as well in February in Stoke-on-Trent with me, Sarah, Romana, and Wendy. We've already sold tickets for that, so we still have some spaces remaining. That's going to be awesome. I'm going to keep doing everything I can. As I say, any more questions, anything you want me to cover more on, please let me know. And I'm going to leave it there. But of course, I will speak to you real soon. Hey!